The LP Innovations Radio Network presents True Crime, the podcast series that explores real stories of employee theft. Employee theft costs companies billions in losses each year, but not all dishonesty involves theft, and not all damages are monetary. In this special edition of True Crime, we examine the darker side of employment as we shed light on a different type of deception. The names and locations have been changed to protect the participants' identities, but this case is a true crime. Some cases defy categorization. These are the investigations that span not weeks or months, but years. The ones that require time's looking glass to see the true connections, when a better perspective allows all the seemingly disparate pieces to come together. And yet, we often find even those answers lead only to more questions. And sometimes the answers hint, with chilling implications, at the true nature of mankind. These are the cases that provide a glimpse of dark things that stalk the shadows, of the terrible beneath the familiar, of the possibilities we sense but pretend don't exist. These are the things that drag us down. To understand this investigation, to see its true revelation, we must first take a brief trip back in history. A history that, like our case, involves a convergence of several pieces. The first recorded use of the term lunacy appears in 13th century medical literature. It is a term derived from the Latin word meaning luna, or moon. And by 1540, lunacy had become a widely used medical term to describe a condition of psychosis whose causes were believed to be rooted in the moon's cycles. And it was the acceptance of the moon's power to affect the brain that opened the doors of plausibility for a more diabolical condition. This disease, not one of just mind and body, but of soul, an ailment called lycanthropy. A silly superstition? Perhaps. The outcome of radical religious beliefs and poor science? Maybe. But as we'll see, a condition not without some evidentiary merit. Because the records from this era suggest that there were beasts who stalked the dark woods and foggy streets. The archives of forensic police reports make note of various attacks that were so vicious and brutal in nature that they could only have been carried out by some horrible beast, but by a beast whose physiology and body mechanics suggested a monster that walked upright like a man. The dichotomy of this evidence led to the conclusion that the creature must be a man possessed, a man transformed to beast by the power of the moon, a werewolf. Those were, of course, different times, a time absent of the comforting rationalizations of science, a time filled with darker nights when only the candle's weak light stood sentry against the blackness, a time before the industrialized world created the 8-hour sleep cycle, a time when people filled the late night hours with reading, writing, and midnight walks and visits. And it was within those dark hours and upon those midnight strolls that another darkness walked among them, a person who, by day, posed as a friendly neighbor, a helpful clerk, or perhaps even a respected doctor. A person whose true face was only revealed in the moonlight or upon the glint of his raised blade. In truth, these killers did transform in the darkness, if not physically, then certainly by lifting the black veil and revealing their violent souls. Today's researchers believe that within the annals of folklore and medical journals, the true nature of the werewolf is revealed, a monster far more real than the mythical creature, but no less terrifying. For in these stories lie the earliest recordings of the psychopath, a beast that still inhabits our world. Psychologists estimate that 4% of the U.S. population fit the profile. Some are violent, the ones we know by name, like Ted Bundy or John Wayne Gacy. The ones who, like the werewolf, we adorn with fantastical titles such as the Night Stalker or the Green River Killer. But those of infamous, terrifying acts account for less than a quarter of these predators. The rest, they stalk their prey in more subtle manners, as described in the books like Dr. Martha Stout's The Sociopath Next Door. Their form of destruction less obvious, but for the victims, no less diabolical. These are the monsters that stand amongst us, unseen, waiting to commit dark deeds that require no moonlight. Hidden in the shadows, protected behind a mask of humanity, intent on disruption and torment in any form, they await their victims on the dark trails of naivety and in the fog-filled alleys of denial. And it is upon one of these modern dark roads that my encounter with the sociopath and my case begins. My case began as a human resource investigation, a point in time where I would meet George for a second time, but still I would not see his true face for several years. The complainant was a young woman named Amy. She had recently terminated her own employment for reasons stated in her letter to the corporate office. According to Amy, her resignation was due to the unethical behaviors of her area manager. The letter was well written, the complaints worthy of review, although it contained nothing so direct as sexual harassment or workplace violence. The four main complaints used words like lie, manipulation, and deceit. The respondent, the man she accused, was her area manager, George, a long-term employee with an almost spotless record who had worked his way up from associate and was in line for promotion to district manager. The company had a strict policy to investigate all human resource complaints, but because of George's well-networked relationships, it fell to me to complete an objective review of the matter and to determine the validity of the complaint. Was George the guy they all thought they knew, or was he something else? As well written as the complaint appeared, vague claims riddled the narrative, and it provided little information to substantiate the accusations, not an unusual problem in HR investigations, which often contain issues of perception. I contacted Amy via phone to discuss her concerns. I explained that my role was to simply collect information in an attempt to substantiate the claims. Amy was hostile. Obviously still very upset over the matter, it became increasingly difficult to keep her on task. Many of my questions were answered in a series of long, drawn-out accusations claiming that we had no idea what a liar George was, or how deceptive he could be. Okay, I said, he's a liar. Give me an example of a time he lied to you. He lies all the time, she responded. I understand. Give me one example. Well, he says he's at a store, but when I call there, he isn't. As an area manager, perhaps he's changed his schedule. No, she said firmly. Sometimes I called all the stores, and he wasn't in any of them. Fair enough. I moved on to another accusation. You said he mistreats women. In what way has he mistreated you? It's the way he talks to me. And how is that? I can't explain, but you just know he's putting you down. It's the way he looks at you. The rest of the interview was much of the same. Accusations without substance or witnesses. Amy struggled to connect her complaints with George's specific actions. Still, there was something about her accusation that bothered me, something that didn't quite add up. I spoke next to the area manager, George. I had met him on previous occasions when he was a store manager, pleasant, friendly, and attentive in seminars. He was well-liked and well-mannered. George seemed a little embarrassed over the complaint. He wasn't angry. Yes, he said, Amy always thought I was up to something. Why do you think that is? I asked. I don't know. I tried to accommodate her school schedule and all. Well, she says you often lied about your location. Is that true? Actually, he chuckled, one time it was. Go on. I was scheduled in another store to do staff reviews. I knew she would call and check up on me. She always did, so I told the manager if she called to just tell Amy I wasn't there so she would stop calling. I see. I told the DM about it, he said. I felt kind of bad, but it always seemed like Amy was trying to manage me. We continued through the points of the complaint. George's responses were much of the same, sincere, direct, and almost lighthearted. If he wore a mask, it was well tailored. George remained calm and professional throughout the interview. He never openly attacked Amy or her character, but in subtle ways he indicated that she was difficult to manage. I know she's suspicious of me, he said, so I tried to be very direct and open with her. I guess it didn't work. Near the end of the interview, he apologized for the time I had to spend on the matter. He added, I wish I could have done a better job gaining her confidence, It's an important part of leadership. I spoke to the other staff members. As is often the case, no one had anything bad to say about George or about Amy, and I found no evidence to support her version of events. I called Amy back and shared my findings. I asked if she could provide any more information or witness to any of her claims. She just laughed. He's too good for that, she said, but you'll find out. Trust me, you will. And then she hung up. Hi, this is Ray Esposito from LP Innovations. Did you know that retailers lose about $40 billion a year to shrink? Whether it's employee theft, shoplifting, or errors, an effective loss prevention program is the best way to prevent and resolve these types of issues. In fact, studies show that companies with a loss prevention program perform significantly better than those without. There's no doubt that today's retailers face some big challenges: increases in employee dishonesty due to personal financial stresses, lower available payroll dollars, which directly impacts operational compliance, little time and few dollars to train against the rise in shoplifting, and the need for heightened merchandise protection, as most operate with lower inventory levels. These are very real problems and they require real solutions, but building a program can be a daunting task, and having enough resources in place is a challenge. That's why for over 17 years, LP Innovations has been providing full-service loss prevention programs, each customized to fit the culture, operations, and budget of small, medium, and large retailers. Our proven 6-component program reduces losses, increases resolution and compliance, creates substantially higher in-store visibility, and greatly improves employee awareness, all while increasing profitability. In fact, most of LPI's clients see an average loss reduction of 20 to 30%, and they enjoy significant expense saving, all while reducing costs and increasing productivity. At LPI, we understand the challenges of retail finances. That's why our programs are designed to fit your budget. Our services are provided at a fixed monthly fee per store, so there's no productivity reductions due to rising travel costs, no price fluctuations resulting from increased benefit costs, and no service interruptions because of staff turnover or vacations. So imagine a loss prevention program customized for your company culture and business goals, managed by an experienced LP director and serviced by a nationwide team of professional and experienced investigators and auditors. Now imagine all of that in a cost-effective solution that gives you a first-year return on your investment. That's the LP Innovations full-service program. Imagine what it can do for you and your company profits. No one seemed surprised at the outcome. George was, after all, a good guy, and the company really liked him. I still had the strange, intuitive feeling that something didn't add up. But there's nothing else to be done, the vice president of HR stated. You're right, it's still just a little off. Well, you said she was hostile on the phone, and that she couldn't substantiate any of her claims, and that there was no witnesses. And that's what bothers me, I said. How so? If you were going to lie to get someone in trouble, why make it such small things? Why make the claims so weak? Why lying instead of inappropriate advances? Why say he manipulated instead of making up some terrible thing that he said? I don't follow, the VP said. If Amy wanted to get him fired, why wouldn't she just go all out with her claims? I received my answer a few years later. It was the type of answer that haunts me, because even had I known the truth during the investigation of Amy's complaints, I would have been no better positioned to resolve the issue. The answer, the truth about George, it was a plume of smoke that was impossible to hold. What I do know is that Amy's claims had probably been true, and like many truths, the strange reality of it was harder to believe than the lie. The real George appeared on a mall security video. The food court had been experiencing a nasty little problem. Someone was using various areas of the floor space as a toilet. On a regular basis, human feces was found on the floor. Mall security had adjusted their cameras to cover the area. On one morning, George appeared. He walked into the food court before opening. He paused by the trash can, dropped his pants, and defecated, and then continued on as if nothing had happened. In the interview, George just laughed. It was little more than a quick bark. The polite sincerity he had once demonstrated was gone. Above his tight smile, his eyes suggested cool calculation. Why, George? He gave another short, cold bark and shrugged. Why not? Was his only response. Sociopathic behavior is not completely understood. Certainly George's pleasure in driving an employee to quit or in his food court actions defy reasonable explanation. Psychologists contend that sociopaths are simply wired differently. Emotions, empathy, socially accepted behaviors. These are all things the sociopath understands, but does not feel. It is a playground for their destructive games. To them, the winner isn't the one who builds the best sandcastles. The winner is the one who knocks them over. The sociopath doesn't work for fame or notoriety, but simply wishes to upset the balance, from the smallest to the largest of things. Both provide equal satisfaction. What seems universally true of the sociopath is that they are natural manipulators. It seems their inability to feel emotion makes them students of its weaknesses, and they use those weaknesses as pawns in their silent games of disruption. Sociopaths wear all kinds of masks. Some use drugs, some are criminals, some remain on the peripheral of society. But others rise to become leaders, to take on respectable roles, and to gain positions where their responsibilities up the ante of their manipulations. Few wear masks like Jason from Friday the 13th. For the sociopath, their greatest weapon is being unseen and unsuspected. By some estimates, sociopaths are responsible for 80% of all crimes, but regardless, they destroy far more lives in less direct manners. It's a hard contemplation for retailers, to have to look deeper into motivation than we ever thought necessary, to have to observe for the subtle indications that the true purpose of an employee's behavior is to erode the lives and the spirits of others, to wreak havoc on the work environment. It's a scary consideration that a smiling, sincere expression might mask such dark intentions, and it's horrifying to contemplate the chilling implications should such a person succeed. The True Crime Podcast is a production of the LP Innovations Radio Network, written and narrated by executive producer Raymond Esposito. Associate producers Heather Beeland and Molly Janelle. Musical score licensed through Shockwave Sound. The names, locations, and some details have been changed to protect the participants' identities. All suspects are considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The views and opinions of this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of LP Innovations, its executive board, management, or staff. LP Innovations and Blue Tracks are registered trademarks. Copyright 2015, all rights reserved.